let's jump in. So, Will, thank you for joining us on the pair program.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah, appreciate you joining us. This is another bonus episode of a mini series that we call How We Hatched. Today we've got Will Wilson spending some time with us. Will is the CEO and one of the co-founders behind Antithesis, a startup that is revolutionizing software testing and system reliability. Will is also a father of 4 kids with a fifth on the way within just a few weeks of us recording today. So I am very excited to lean into some of those questions on how you juggle the chaos of building a startup and raising a family. I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs out there could take some notes. So again, excited to have you with us today, and thanks for joining us on the pod. And let's jump in. So I always like to start these episodes off with a pretty thought-provoking question, which would be, what did Will Wilson have for breakfast this morning?
So I actually generally don't eat breakfast, and then I eat lunch really early, and everybody here makes fun of me for that. Sometimes at like 10:15 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. somebody will come ask me like, "Hey, isn't it a little bit late for you to have lunch?" So today was no exception. I did not eat breakfast, and then I ate lunch at 11:20 a.m.
Oh,
I think
nice.
it was a perfectly reasonable time.
Yeah. You always find folks that are either like super gung-ho breakfast, like, what do you mean you don't eat breakfast? And then the folks are like, yeah, I don't eat breakfast. And it's just like, yeah, it is what it is. Cool. Well, let's kind of set the stage for our guest here on what we're really going to be dissecting on this episode. So Antithesis is a startup that operated in stealth mode for about 5 years. I'll repeat that for our listeners: 5 years in stealth. Prior to kind of making the company known publicly. And this is a topic that we get a lot of interest from our community specifically. So we will be chatting quite a bit on that stealth mode journey, in addition to obviously learning a bit more about the problems that you're solving at Antithesis. But I did want to mention that early on for our listeners that are tuning in. So on these episodes, I do like to kind of turn back the clock a little bit and initially just kind of hear a little bit about you, Will, and your journey down that path into technology. When was it that you kind of realized that you had a passion for tech?
Sure. So I screwed around with computers a lot when I was a kid. In high school, I installed Linux on a laptop, and I'm so old that this was back in the days where doing that was very, very hard. And I actually learned quite a lot about computers just from that experience alone. Then when I got to college, I basically didn't do anything related to tech or computers at all. I studied pure math. And this is actually kind of funny and a little embarrassing maybe. So I was in school in like the mid 2000s, and I distinctly remember having this thought that was like, hey, this tech stuff seems pretty cool. Too bad I'm too late, you know? Too bad like all the interesting companies have already been started, and there's already Google, there's already Facebook. What else is there to do? Like that's so over. I'm just gonna have to find something else. So I didn't really do anything with computer science or tech at all in college. And then I graduated and I worked in like science, like biology, medical research, did a bunch of different things, and like had this like very jarring experience where I realized one day that my ability to write like a really low quality Python script, in 45 minutes that would like automate some entire large task I had to do or one of my lab mates had to do was like by far the most valuable quality I brought to that job. And I was like, like maybe this computer science thing has something to it after all. And then, I also got very interested in databases because I saw this database query, which took like days and days to run, and, made a small tweak to it, and it, finished in 5 minutes. And I was like, that's weird. Like how did that happen? Right. Like, and so, I had these thoughts that maybe there was something cool there after all. And then basically my first kid was born, and I wanted to find a career that had better hours and better pay than what I was doing. And I was on paternity leave. And so I just started studying data structures, algorithms, all that stuff, using like online classes and so on. And, found it very intellectually engaging and very satisfying. And I was like, wait a minute, like this is totally unfair. You mean there was this job out there all along, which is like interesting and pays you well, like, and is like full of nice people and like very low barriers to entry. And like, you mean I could have been doing this the whole time? Right. And so then I sort of did a career switch into tech in my mid to late 20s and been here ever since.
That's so fascinating when you look back and in perspective of, all the good big tech companies have already been built, what's left to be built. And then, you fast forward to today, it's like AI is just eating the world.
Well,
And
right, exactly. It's never too late.
but it's so true. I think we are we're kind of in a similar age. So I can remember back to those early days when Facebook was the thing. Um, Now, looking at your kind of profile on LinkedIn, and just kind of studying a little bit about your journey, this computational biodynamics company jumps out to me because it looks like early on you were kind of drawn into the world of serving as an entrepreneur. Expand a little bit into how that kind of opportunity was formed, and what drove you down that path of wanting to do something on your own.
Yeah, no, so that was a very right. That was a very, very early job of mine. Basically, I worked when I was in high school as an intern at a hospital, and became close to one of the doctors who worked there. And he had this very good idea. It's still a very good idea for a startup. And basically, I did a gap year between high school and college, and worked with him on that, and then also worked on it on and off throughout college, and then for a little while afterwards. And you know, it was very cool to see that you can just like take an idea and start trying to do it, right? And that was like a little bit of a revelation to me at the time, and it was like definitely a very valuable thing I got out of that experience. Like the other valuable thing I got out of that experience was like a little bit of an indication of what not to do. Like the problem that we had at that company, I would say the fundamental problem and the reason that it wasn't ultimately successful was that it had a large number of quote unquote co-founders, all of whom were working full time as surgeons or doctors or scientists, or professors, and were mostly dedicated to that. And we're kind of like doing this nights and weekends. And it's just very hard to make anything get big and real if at least one person isn't making it their like full-time occupation,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, just trying to juggle a couple of things while building.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that was a gap year through high school, after high school and between college. And then, we can kind of do a quick sprint through, call it like a 2-minute drill on your journey up to starting Antithesis. And I'll have some questions digging into a few of those key roles. But give me the quick kind of like 2 minutes on, where you bounced around to, because I think it's important to build some context on, startups and then some FANG companies and then leading into this current role.
Yeah, yeah. So it was after a computational biodynamics, after a couple of other sort of more sciency roles that I got into tech. And the first like really real tech job I landed was at FoundationDB, which was, you know, hugely influential on me and on my career trajectory ever since then. I mean, not least because like half the people who work at this company now are people who I met there.
Sure.
My co-founder Dave Scher was my boss at FoundationDB. Our COO Nick Lavezzo was the COO at FoundationDB. Our director of operations, our director of engineering, like all worked there. So that's actually really cool. That I've worked with all these people for such a long time, and that we all know each other and trust each other a great deal. But basically, I got to FoundationDB and I saw there a different, beautiful, and awesome side of programming, right? Like, I'd gotten really into the theoretical aspect and the, algorithmic complexity and data structures and like, sort of pure CS because I was coming from a math background. And at FoundationDB, like there was a lot of the other extreme, right? There was a lot of like really hardcore, low level systems programmers. We were writing a distributed database, right? like people who like lived and breathed, system calls and, how to communicate with an SSD in the most efficient possible way. And like, stuff that earlier on I would have like sneered at, but like, jokes on me because like this is actually like just as beautiful and worthwhile and like and intricate and difficult and like and cool. And so I saw that whole side of our industry and was really blown away by that and very, very, very impressed by a lot of what those people were doing. Um, so the other way that FoundationDB really matters to the subsequent trajectory is it gave us, me and Dave, a lot of the ideas that led us to start this company. Because FoundationDB, we're trying to build a distributed database, which is a very hard thing to build and a very hard thing to get right. And so, in order to do that, we invested in building a really radically different approach to software testing. Um, and it's in many ways the precursor or the inspiration to the product that we've built here, right? So we're trying to take the thing that we made for FoundationDB to make it possible to test that software and to find all the bugs in it before customers did. And we're trying to make that easy for everybody to do here. And that was actually very much influenced also by what we saw afterwards, right? Like we got bought by Apple in 2015 and went there and I Apple is full of like super smart people. It's a very, very high talent density company, but they did not have the internal tools that we had at FoundationDB. And like that was like clearly evident in how people operated and made decisions. And, at Google, which I left Apple and went to Google and I saw much the same thing. I worked on a team at Google that was also building a distributed database, a system called Spanner, which was a very, very impressive team, really smart people, tons of really smart people. But again, lacking in tools which could tell them right away when they were making a mistake.
Wow.
And that just makes you have to work in such a different way, right? Like it means that you're always worrying, hey, is this code that I'm writing going to cause some huge problem in production? Like, how can I reason through this correctly? How can I like, how can I have some confidence that this is going to be right? And I suddenly realized then that my experience at FoundationDB had been really atypical, right? Like having this ability to just like press a button and find out if what you'd done was good or not. It was like actually not how most of the industry lived.
Which is wild, to see that the biggest tech companies in the world, weren't adapting to this kind of, philosophy that you all had kind of figured out at FoundationDB, which is just, it's got to be that aha moment, that light bulb's going off like, wow, there really is something here,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And my first concern, and actually also Dave's first concern was like, there's no free lunch, right? Like there's no $100 bills lying on sidewalks. So if we at our tiny startup were doing this and it was like so transformative for us, and these like giant companies aren't doing it, like there must be some reason, right? There
Yeah.
must be some secret reason why it's not a good idea or it's impossible or like you can't really do this at a large scale or something, right? But, you know, but actually what we've realized, like there are some reasons that make it harder and a lot of those are things that we've tried to directly address with our product and with our technology. But at the end of the day, like the efficient markets hypothesis is just wrong. Like there actually is like there actually is stuff out there that would just make the world better that nobody's doing. And if you think you've spotted it and like you kind of rule out all the other possibilities, like you may actually have found such a thing.
Yeah, the blog that you wrote that I stumbled across that kind of led me down to, sending you a note and wanting to chat with you is titled is something bugging you. And in that blog, you do relate to starting a company, kind of like telling yourself that when you reach this pit full of poisonous spikes, you'll figure something out. Expand on that a little bit for me, because I think that you point that out a couple of times in the blog. I think that's just a fascinating example.
Yeah, well, so the I guess the point I was trying to make there is that usually every company is going to have something about it that's hard, right? Like I just said a second ago that I don't believe in the efficient markets hypothesis, but like maybe I believe in a slightly weaker version of it, which is like if something is trivially easy and obviously a good idea, somebody will probably have done it. So if it's a really good idea and nobody's done it yet, there's probably something about it that is challenging.
Right.
And so, different companies have different things about them that are challenging, right? Some of them, like the product is really hard to build. Some of them, the product is easy to build, but it's hard to sell. Like some of them, it's easy to build and easy to sell, but hard to find a competitive moat. Like there's, it just depends on the area and on the details of your thing. And I think it's very important to know, or to at least have a guess going in, what is the hard part going to be?
Sure.
Because there's probably a hard part, and you should probably have a plan for it.
And were some of these kind of alumni from FoundationDB that they all kind of got absorbed into Apple as well? Did you all kind of stay in close connection here as you're moving on to Google and so forth? I'm always curious on how that co-founder connection kind of stays relevant even post acquisition.
Yeah. We all stayed in touch socially, even as we sort of diffused through a wide variety of companies. Like, I would say about half to 3/4 of us all joined Apple. Some people decided not to. Um, you know, Once we got there, some people quickly moved to other parts of Apple. Some of us, like me, moved to other companies. But we all stayed pretty close. Like,
Yeah.
we had all been working together um, on this startup for like 4 or 5 years by the time we were bought. And so we were close. Like we had kids the same age, people knew each other. It was a very tight knit team in a lot of ways. And it's been awesome getting the gang back together.
For sure. Yeah, it's always you can pinpoint a lot of times within an entrepreneur's journey that kind of like essential role that kind of stands out is like, that was like the premise to all of what's building in your current venture. And so really quick, like diving into the creation of Antithesis here. So you're spending your time at Google at this point, and sounds like you all are kind of in communication about the idea. How does that all kind of come together, and when do you kind of make the jump to to leave Google and go headfirst into this thing?
Yeah. So basically, Dave had already left Apple and was getting ready to move back to the East Coast when I sort of thought, there really is a company here. Like, I was at Google, I was like seeing frustrations my team was having, and I was like, so I started messaging Dave, and I was like, look, man, you've quit your job, you need something else to do. What, let's do this. And Dave is like a super genius, and so I sort of gave him my whole idea for how this should work and how the product should be architected and what it should do and so on. And he sort of thought about it. I still remember this. We got lunch, and he sort of explained back to me how the product should work, but his version was just like 10 times better, right? And so I'm like, at that point, I'm like, okay, Dave, like I need you, man. Like, you need to do this. And he's like, nah, I wanna take a vacation. So he moved back to DC, and I stayed in touch with him. Um, at one point, I was on a work trip uh, for Google in Singapore. I was there training a bunch of our sales guys for Google Cloud, telling them about product features in Google Cloud. And I remember I was up in the middle of the night because I was totally jet lagged, and there was like nobody who I could talk to in Singapore. And so I was just like texting with Dave and being like, look, man, like this company's a great idea. Here's why it's a great idea. And like, that was like, actually, we were like in very close communication for that week. And finally, by the end of it, he was like, all right, fine. Like, I don't actually want to do a vacation. I do want to start another company. So, and so as soon as I had him on board, like I definitely like Dave immediately starts thinking about how is this going to work? What is the right way to build this? What is this product going to look like? And like, I realized that I did not want to be having those conversations while still employed at another company just for any avoidance of any kind of like question about, where I was working at the time.
Sure.
So basically I was immediately like, don't talk to me about this until I've quit, and immediately set about, leaving Google, and then moving back to the East Coast because we decided to start the company here. So,
Wow.
From the moment that we decided to do it until the moment that I moved east, not a lot of time, maybe 1 month.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting. You been to Singapore since?
I wish. The food there is incredible.
That's where the magic happened. Awesome. All right. So now I want to, pivot into Antithesis here, and then we're going to go into stealth mode world for a little bit, but give me give me kind of like the elevator pitch on Antithesis.
Sure. Okay. So if you're a software engineer, you probably know that most software engineers spend, I think Stripes did a survey, and they estimate about half their time on testing, debugging, dealing with production emergencies, dealing with bugs or inconsistencies in the libraries or the dependencies that your code has, figuring out triaging issues coming in from production, figuring out which ones are bugs, which ones aren't. Like, by the way, like a lot of non-engineers who are in tech don't realize that this is what engineers spend half their time doing.
Right.
In fact, it might be quite a lot more than half their time. They're surprised when they hear that, but I think every engineer knows it. So now ask yourself, is this your like favorite half of your day or your least favorite half of your day? And I think for most people, it's their least favorite half of the day. Okay, well, we're software engineers, right? Like, why don't we like automate this? Why don't we get rid of this? Why don't we have somebody else, like have a computer do this part of our jobs if we hate it? Like, that's the usual thing software engineers do. Well, it turns out it's actually very, very hard, right? Conventional testing, like writing a test that your software, when you do A, it does B, isn't very good at preventing you from running into bugs later in production, because you tend to test the paths or the situations that you thought of, right? That's almost definitional. But the things that you thought of are also the things where you probably wrote the code correctly in the first place. Like the things that lead to actual problems, the things that cause all this wasted time and energy are the things you didn't think of. They're the unknown unknowns, the things that happen in the real world that you never imagined could happen. And so because of that, testing is like a pretty good way of catching regressions in behavior that you already made correct, but really bad way of like forward looking, ensuring that something works. So our approach here is to try to turn this all on its head and say, instead of writing tests, like you're never going to write another test. Instead, what you're going to do is you're just going to tell us what your software is supposed to do, right? You're going to say, these are the high level properties or invariants that it has, right? And depending on the kind of software, this could be really different types of things, right? Like if it's a database, it might be like, it should never crash. If it says it stored your data, it should have actually stored your data. If it can go through arbitrarily bad network situations, but then if everything quiets down again and it's reachable again, after 10 seconds, it should be back up, right? If you're making a website, it could be totally different stuff. It could be like there's no broken links. I can get to every page. I can complete the checkout flow. If you're making a computer game, it could be like, it's possible to beat the game. I can load every asset in the game, right? But in every case, it's like kind of high level what it's supposed to do. And then by we, I mean computers, are going to try to find ways of proving you wrong, right? We're going to try to construct test cases dynamically, like that take some path that you weren't expecting, that show you a way of making your software do something that it wasn't supposed to do. And this solves a whole bunch of problems at one fell swoop. It solves one really big problem, which is the one I said, right? Unknown unknowns. Like, you've just said what you think your software is supposed to do, and we're going to find some way of making it not do that. And the way we do that might be really surprising to you, but it might be really important because it might be something that you hit in production next week. Another problem it solves, though, is like maintainability of tests. Because like one thing that's bad about testing is, often your tests depend on very low level implementation details of your software. And that means that every time you change your software, you like break all your tests and you have to change those too. And this is like a maintenance burden and a maintenance nightmare. And so, but the high level, like what is your software actually supposed to do? Like its specification, that changes much more slowly than its implementation, right? And so like expressing these properties, like it should never crash, it should be available after 10 seconds, whatever. Like that tends to not have to change with every single commit. And so what it means at the end of the day is that you're spending way, 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 way less time writing tests and maintaining tests and trying to figure them out. So like both of these things like directly attack major time wastes for engineers. And then I guess the third thing that's quite unique about our approach, and and that's pretty cool, is we've developed a way to run any computer system, any collection of software fully deterministically. Meaning that like no matter what random weird stuff your software does, like we can make it do it again, like always, perfectly. So that's really cool because oftentimes people have like flaky bugs or flaky tests. Like there's this bug, it breaks on your computer but works on your buddies, or like even worse than that, like it breaks 1 out of every 1,000 times or 1 out of every million times, and that's often enough that your customers will totally hit it all the time, and it'll be really hard for you to track it down though, right? It breaks, and then when you add some debugging code, it stop, like the problem goes away, right? Like this kind of stuff like also sucks up countless hours of people's time, and like we just completely eliminate that problem, which is also pretty cool.
Yeah, the future of like I've deterministic testing and autonomous systems. It sounds like you guys are really tackling those problems head on. And I don't hear too much of other companies kind of like probing in on that deterministic testing piece of things. So it's a really interesting concept. Just talking generally about the company at large. So when did you all formally kind of stand up shop?
I think it was 2017, 2018, one of those years.
It's about 6 or 7 years old at this point. And what's the current head count of Antithesis?
We're just about at 50.
Okay.
Yep.
And from a funding perspective, I guess how much funding have you all received at this point?
In total, we've raised, I think, just shy of $47 million over that period.
And the company has a headquarters in Arlington, Virginia?
Yeah, we're actually in Tyson's Corner,
Tyson's
just a little
Corner.
bit outside Arlington.
And the bulk of your team kind of virtual, or is it already in
office?
Yeah,
we're pretty much all in person, which I guess these days is
rare.
Weird. Yeah,
that's rare. Yeah, it's cool though. I think getting back to that from a culture perspective is super key and important for early stage startups. So kudos on making that decision and sticking to it. So I want to pivot a little bit more into the stealth mode journey. So as we mentioned, Antithesis, you all remained in stealth mode for over 5 years, which is unusual for startups. Can you dive a little bit deeper into what you would say were some of those key decisions and what the advantages and challenges that this kind of approach presented for you all?
Yeah, totally. So, the first thing, just to get out of the way, is like we had the opportunity to stay in stealth for a very long time. Many people don't. And we had that opportunity because we got really lucky. Like basically, we had a prior big success and a lot of investors who were excited about taking another spin with that team, right? Yeah. And so that meant that we had access to capital, and it meant that we had access to investors without having to make a big splash. And that's not an option that everybody has, right? If it's your first company and you're a kid in a garage, or a middle-aged person in a garage, you may need to make a big splash in order to attract the attention of an investor. And so then stealth is sort of off the table for you, and that's just like one way in which we were very lucky here, is we had the option of doing that because we had existing relationships with people who wanted to give us money. So So that's what made it possible. And then the question is like, and by the way, it's actually not just access to money, it's also access to talent, right?
Yeah.
Because hiring while you're in stealth is actually super, super challenging. But again, like we had, a previous team that we had worked with very closely for a long time. We were all still really tight, really in touch. We had gone on to meet more people at Apple and Google and other places and could bring in a whole bunch of those people as well. And so, between both capital and talent, we had ways of getting access to it without coming out of stealth. So then the question is like, why would you still like, even if you have the opportunity, why would you ever want to do that? And basically, we knew like it's a trajectory that's like maybe a little bit more common for like a hardware company. Like the thing about our technology and our approach was that there was just an awful lot that we had to do before we could like even possibly start working with customers. Like we had to write this hypervisor, which can take any software and run it deterministically. That took a little while. And that was, it's not like writing a website. Like that's hard. And then we had to write the system which takes that thing and intelligently explores all the possible trajectories and paths your code could take. And that's also really hard, and that took a while. And then we had to write the thing that like takes all the results from that and like visualizes them for you and like makes it possible for a human being to understand what it did. And that's a whole nother challenge of a very different kind that's also really hard. And we're like, it's going to take us years to do these things. And it kind of would like, there's not like really an MVP that we can just get out there and have a customer start using. We kind of need to get it all working, right?
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we're looking around the market, and this was a time when, money was raining from the skies in terms of tech investment. And we're like, nobody else is really doing this. Like, do we really want to go get the whole world super excited about this right now? Or do we want to try and get a big technology head start and then get the world excited about it? And that latter choice seemed more attractive to us. And I think on balance, it was probably the right choice. I think I appreciate now that we're out of stealth all of the sort of unseen costs that being in stealth for a long time has. So you mentioned challenges. There are actually many. One of them is morale. Like, I think we never like had really bad morale. Like we never really struggled with that. But like today we have really, really good morale and like significantly better than, before we came out of stealth, before we launched. And, that's just like the most natural thing about human beings, right? Like it's really hard to work on something day in, day out and not be allowed to tell anybody about it.
Right.
Like, and like, it's hard for me. It's even harder for somebody I hire who's a new grad, whose mom is probably like, why aren't you working at Facebook? Why aren't you working at OpenAI? What is this stupid company I've never heard of? Right? Like, it's really nice for that person to be able to send an article to their mom and be like, no, look, this company is actually cool. It actually exists and does something. Right.
Sure.
Like, and, not just that kind of morale either, but like, once you're out there, once people are reacting to you, once you're reacting to them, suddenly people conceptualize themselves differently. Like, it's not like our company is this like hermetic, isolated environment and we have like various struggles and challenges. Now it's like us against the world. And like, everybody's pulling in the same direction and people are directly seeing the effects of what they do out there in the world. Right. And like some rando on Twitter is like, oh, this is such a cool feature. Like the guy who wrote that feature is now going to have a great day.
Yeah.
Like it just sort of points everybody in the same direction and catalyzes them in a way that's really, really hard to do while you're in stealth. The other thing, the last thing I'll mention, and then I'll let you ask a question, is like so much of life is about luck, right? And you can't control luck, but you can control like the ability of good and bad luck to strike to a certain extent. Like, and when you're in stealth, you just make it really, really hard for serendipity of any kind to happen. Like, I'll give you an example. You stumbling across that blog post and sending me an email. Like, obviously there would be no possible way for that to happen when we're completely secret, right?
Right.
That was just like, that was good luck. That was like a random thing that the universe threw my way. But like, it's because I put myself in the position for that to happen by writing a blog post and being out there. And it's like the same way with hiring. It's the same way with customers. It's the same way with like people randomly sending me an email with like a really good idea for like a product feature, or like, hey, you're an idiot, it shouldn't work this way, right? Like all of that stuff just like cannot happen at anywhere near the same scale when you're in stealth. And that is, I think, maybe the biggest cost. And it's one that's like totally hidden as well.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating point, because I think a lot of people, when they think about running in stealth, they're going to think about the obvious things. Like you pointed out, recruiting being a challenge. I can tell you firsthand, trying to recruit talent for a stealth mode startup is probably the most difficult thing we've ever had to do, just because you're selling this thing that you can't talk about. It's like selling something that you're so secretive about it's just extremely difficult. It's already hard enough to sell a startup, even if it's publicly out there and everything else is known. But to keep a lot of those things behind the curtain makes it 10 times more challenging. But nobody really talks about the morale piece to it. The thing that everybody's going back home to their family, and another day on the job, but it's like, I can't even look you guys up on a website. It's like, you start to find almost like folks don't even believe like it's real.
No, that's right.
And I think that is a very interesting perspective that I have never really heard about from the internal team. That cultural perspective, that team morale perspective, that can really start to weigh on folks if it's 1 year, but 5 years. So it's almost like this all this bottled up energy that finally just gets to be released when you all made the decision to be publicly known. Did you what was the strategy, and were how are those conversations had between the team on how we're going to do it, and why this is now the right time and everything else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the single biggest reason that we decided to come out of stealth was, it was really twofold. Number one, most of the advantages of being in stealth were evaporating because the world had moved into a much more challenging fundraising climate, right? And so we were suddenly a lot less worried about a new well-funded competitor showing up. And we were also a lot less worried about some big tech company spinning up a team to do this. Like, big tech companies are laying people off right now. They're not like funding super speculative efforts. And so like it just seemed like that reason had gone away. And then on the flip side, the opportunity for us coming out of stealth was much, much greater because we had just sort of finally like finished our product and like made it like quite good and made it quite scalable and made it so that the company could take on a lot of new customers all at once. And so we were like, all right, this is it. Like, let's hit go. Obviously, like that wasn't an overnight thing. Like there was a lot that we had to do. And like so much of that work was incredibly valuable, even if it hadn't led to us coming out of stealth. Like one of the first and most important things we had to do was like make a website. We had no website. It sounds crazy, right? But we had no website. Okay, what's going on the website? Well, I guess on the website, we should tell people what it is we do and how it works. Okay, well, what is it we do? Like we obviously had some idea, right? We had some vision of the problem we were solving and how it cashes out. But like we had never, like in a systematic and disciplined way, sat down and come up with exactly how you would explain this to somebody.
Yeah.
And like what, and just like that exercise of like, what would go on our website actually clarified many other like strategic questions and like what product features should we be working on. Like suddenly it's kind of apparent, like because we know what we want to put on the website, right? And there's just like a lot of things like that where the act of preparing yourself to present this to the world forces you to confront certain questions that are actually very important for you to confront. Um, so that was, like our product basically barely had a user interface before we came out of stealth. Like it was
Wow.
extremely cobbled together. And we're sort of like, okay, if we're going to show this to the world and we're going to have a demo on our website, I guess it should have a user interface, right?
Yeah.
Like, I guess there should be something you can see. Like, okay, like maybe we should work on that, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just like it does sort of force you to think about it in a different way, and that's really good, And then the other strategic question is like, our our long term plans are really big, right? Um, but in the short term, we can't do all that stuff yet. And so like you kind of need to figure out like how am I going to define this company right now? Like when we come out of stealth, like it's like they're a blank company. Like what is that? Like what do we say that we are day one, right?
Right.
Even with the knowledge that 10 years down the line it might look very very different. And like that strategic question is also a really really important one to figure out, and also a thing that we had to spend some time on.
Did you guys have much of a go-to-market team at this point, or was it really just primarily tech folks?
Yeah, we had a small sales team. Go to market. Yeah, we had 3 people working on that.
Wow.
And they were, I mean, they had a very tough job, right? Because they were
Yeah.
trying to sell something with no website
Yeah.
to sophisticated business buyers who, would hear about it and they'd be like, wait a minute, this thing is like a scam. Like, how could this be possibly be real? Right. And so that was very challenging for them. And but I actually think there's some ways in which that like is like amazing training, right?
Right.
It's like professional athletes like practice with ankle weights and like
Yeah.
Roman gladiators used like heavy wooden swords, so when they actually got the real sword it'd be way easier. Like, Demosthenes like gave speeches with a mouthful of marbles,
That's
like
right.
like suddenly like being able to send people like product demos and websites and stuff and like other reference customers, it's like
Yeah.
oh, like now it's easy to sell.
Right. I mean, even just like sending them some swag or something,
Yeah.
like I could see it in the background. Like, is this your all's kind of like your mascot? Is it like an anteater?
Yeah, this is a mascot. These are actually like a couple of failed mascots. Like
Okay.
the eventual success round up on the website, but these are some like mid-journey generated ones that we decide not to go with.
Yeah, I dig it though. But even something as small as that, just like, that's all part of branding and marketing and just being able to go out there and show like, yeah, here it is. Here's who we are. Yeah, having that training without any ammunition is yeah, it'll harden somebody but make them a better salesperson. So I think that's a fascinating perspective. Um, so now you guys have been out, publicly known for how long?
About 3 months.
And have what have you seen as the biggest upside now that, in these last 3 months? Has it been from, an uptick in recruiting's been easier, sales? What is it that you've seen as a drastic change?
It's been unreal. Like, I mean, I would say honestly the most obvious and apparent thing is just like every day I walk in the office and the energy is so different. Like everybody is like still riding that high from coming out of stealth, which is pretty cool.
That's cool.
And people are really excited and really motivated to make this thing happen. Like, yeah, like it has been obviously completely revolutionary for sales insofar as people can now find out about us. We have inbound for the first time ever, right? That's pretty cool. Um,
It's helpful.
yeah, it's helpful. That's right. It's been good for recruiting too. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's been good for a lot of things. Um, you know, like I do ask myself sometimes, like, was it the right decision to stay in stealth for so long? And I think that like, hindsight's 2020. It's hard to say for sure. I think that like it was the right decision to do it for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I think if I had to do it all over again, I might have done the launch like 6 months earlier or something. But But I think we did actually get a lot of strategic benefit out of being so quiet for such a long time while we built this futuristic technology. It's just like, if you listener are thinking of doing that, be aware that there are very real costs.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that you make a really valid point with it's been a crazy time in the market for tech in the last, 4 years since the pandemic, right? It's been this kind of roller coaster of, like you mentioned, time and a place of raising, those funds. 2021. I mean, there's no better time to be raising capital. You fast forward, a year and a half to 2 years later, and
Pretty
it's awful.
savage. Yep.
And so, the market conditions and timing of everything, truly, probably, it sounds like you acknowledge played a big part in your ability to let's extend the timeline a little bit. We don't have to be so rushed. And I think that's a very different argument for somebody that's maybe trying to operate right now. That's
Totally.
under the gun.
Well,
But
totally. Yeah. Interest rates being higher just means everybody's looking for a faster return.
that's
That
right.
includes investors. That includes you, the founder, right? That
Yeah,
includes everybody. And so, that does mean you should be looking for opportunities that can pay off a little quicker.
that's right. Well, that's kind of it's kind of put a bow on the stealth mode discussion, and just one final question in terms of looking forward towards the future. What do you kind of anticipate or see within like those areas of deterministic testing and autonomic autonomous systems evolving? Anything that you're really excited about, and obviously this will play into what it is that you're building, but any hot takes or anything that you're anticipating?
I think the everybody seems to be very excited. Well, no. A year ago, everybody was very excited about LLMs writing code. I think now we're sort of like maybe entering the hangover phase where people are like, wait a minute, these things write code really fast and it's not all correct. And, and also someday I'm going to have to modify this code or read it or understand it. And
Yeah,
it having been produced by this machine makes it much harder to do all that. And so I think that is going to, but at the same time, there's like real value there if you could make good use of these things writing code for you. And so I think that's just going to put a lot of pressure on testing practices, right? Like being able to have any kind of confidence that this thing that ChatGPT spat out is going to like do the right thing and not crash your computer is like suddenly it's going to take on way more salience. And so I think for that reason it's like a very very exciting time to be in the like software testing or QA space, which is like sort of a funny thing to say, right? Like software testing and QA sounds like the most boring, horrible thing ever, right? It's like taking out garbage. Which is one reason I like it. It's like a reason people don't do it, right? So then I get to do it. Um, but but yeah, I think it's like probably the most important time to be working on this problem, and so I think it's going to be cool.
yeah, that's a good analogy, the dirty jobs analogy. But there's a reason that garbage men get paid pretty well too. Like
Right.
nobody else wants to do that job. Um, cool. All right. I think that's a good wrap on a little bit of your journey and the story. And I think we'll close with our 5 second scramble segment. So this is just a little fun rapid fire Q&A. We're gonna bounce a couple of questions your way and try to answer them within 5 seconds. We're not gonna air horn you off or anything like that. But are you ready to jump into it?
Ready or not.
All right. Explain antithesis to me as if I were a 5-year-old.
We use AI to find problems in software.
What is your favorite part about the culture at Antithesis?
No assholes.
What type of technologist will thrive at Antithesis?
Somebody who likes working on hard stuff.
What are the top tech roles that you're hiring for today?
Oh, at everything, man.
We'll direct folks to the careers page, which is now publicly facing. So,
That's right. That's right.
um, what what is a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
Corporate philanthropy. Um, I That's a good question. I mean, do you want like stuff that's like local in our area or stuff
Oh,
that's
there's
like
something that's
global and
maybe just
impact?
personal to you, something that's touched you and, over the years, or something that, resonates with you that, you like to donate to.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think there's a lot of really, really good efforts to like anti-malaria efforts,
Mm,
like, mosquito nets, bed nets, that kind of thing. I think that stuff has a huge impact and is really, really good for the world. Like the and I think people should like totally donate to that kind of stuff. I also think it's like really important to do something that's directly involved in your own community and that's like closer to home. And, so there's like a bunch of churches in DC that have very active homeless ministries that I've helped out with. And there's a lot of homeless people in DC these days.
yep.
And it's a bit of a crisis. And so that's a thing that my family's done some of.
Cool. Yeah, we like to highlight some of those when we post this out. So I'll get you to share some of the specific
Sweet.
orgs that we can highlight. Um, which of your four children is your favorite? I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Not an answerable answer. Um, describe for me your morning routine.
My morning routine, I wake up. Um, Usually at least one of my children is already awake. And so I get them dressed, feed them. These days, the bigger ones can feed themselves. That's good. I make myself tea or coffee. I sadly check up on what's happened with the company overnight. I, um, I usually try to hang out with my kids in the morning because by evening, like I'm tired, they're tired. There's still an opportunity for hanging out, but like it's a little bit has just a different character. Um, and then once everybody's off to school, I come to work, or if it's a nice day like today, I bike to work, which is very nice.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a nice routine. I agree with you. The morning hang with the kids is a different experience. You're less burnout. You're not, you're kind of a little bit more present. So it's good perspective. What's the worst fashion trend that you've ever followed?
bell bottoms.
Solid. What is something that you love to do but you're really bad at?
Ooh, that's a good one, man. Sailing.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy.
It's not. And if I like to say if I had more time, I would be better at it, but I don't have any time.
Um, what was your dream job as a kid?
I wanted to be Emperor of Mars. But it seems like Elon's going to beat me to it, which is
Yeah,
just
I mean, hey, we're not
savage.
too far off. And then I'll close with this one. Who is your favorite Disney character?
My favorite Disney, man, it's been a long time since I watched a Disney movie.
Well, now they own Star Wars and all the other fun.
Trying to think. Um, I liked the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sensitive heart, sensitive
That's right.
soul,
That's right.
but
Gruff
was
exterior.
always,
Yeah,
judged the wrong way.
that's right.
Good one. It's a first. We asked that question to most every guest and never heard the Beast before. So kudos on the uniqueness. Cool. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us, Will. I'm excited for the future of what you all are building at Antithesis, and you're an awesome entrepreneur and a good human. Good luck on the new addition to the family, and
Thank you.
we're rooting for you all. Thanks for hanging out with us on the pod.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for having me.